Welcome to the Kling Connection Travel Talks Podcast, where travel isn't just a topic, it's a conversation. Hosted by Sean Kling, each episode takes you beyond the postcards and into the real highs, lows, and unforgettable moments from life on the road. You'll hear from fellow travelers, industry pros, and digital nomads who share their best tips, budget tricks, and stories that make you want to pack your bags right away. Whether you're a casual weekend explorer or living life out of a suitcase, Kling Connection brings the travel world to life, one incredible journey at a time.
Hey, Kling Connection fam. Welcome back to another episode of the Kling Connection. Today, I have an amazing guest that's going to open up a plethora of questions that you'll have as well as I'll have about his life in general, but also things like getting second citizenship or residency in another country. But, I mean, this guy's done it all. He's been on television. He's been a producer. He's been at the UN. He's been all over the place. So without further ado, Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks a million, and I'm really happy to be here. It sounds like it's going to be exciting.
Thanks for coming on the show. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Okay, so I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And for those of you who live like in Florida, like you do, Sean, Edmonton is one of the farthest north cities probably in the world. Cold during the winter, to the point where, for example, cars freeze up. And unless you've got, a block heater connected to electricity to the house at night, in the morning when you get to the car doesn't start. You have to use a credit card to scrape off the frost from the windshield and see if you can get it going. So that's the kind of life I started off with, in the cold. But strangely, I lived half my life in Canada and half my life in the United States. And that was because my mother had a sister, Helen, who lived in Los Angeles. And so they bicycled me back and forth. In the summertime, during breaks, I would be in Los Angeles with my aunt, and in the winter back in Canada going to school. And then in high school, I came and I was in high school in Los Angeles. And that played out later in my life as well, because although I'm a Canadian lawyer and a Canadian, I also became an American lawyer. And in fact, I practiced law in Los Angeles for 10 years. And then later I was working in New York for 5 years before I came back to Canada. Right now, I'm in Toronto practicing law with Pace Law Firm.
Oh, that's cool. Now, I was reading someplace that you did some stuff with the UN. I'm kind of interested in that. What led to you working with the UN?
Okay, so the story there was I wrote articles for a Canadian news outlet called the Southern News Services. And they had newspapers across Canada. But I also wrote for some other newspapers. And my legal background back in Canada involved a stint where I was campaigning to get the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, to broadcast in languages other than English and French. And that kind of spurred an interest into, broadcasting and journalism. And I was approached by a group that wanted to be accredited at the UN. And what better person to do something like that than a lawyer who's also kind of working in the journalism area. And so that's how I ended up over there. I'm Ukrainian in background. And at that time, Ukrainians were trying to get accreditation at the UN. And that's the group that approached me to see if we could get accredited. So that's how I ended up there.
So did you meet anybody really interesting while you were at the UN?
It's funny you should say that, because I did meet some people. So, for example, now meet, is a loose term for me. Meet doesn't mean I know them and I can call them. But meet, yes, I met. So, for example, the people that were going through back then were people like President Carter, President Ford, Idi Amin, if you know from Uganda who that was. Kurt Waldheim was the Secretary General. Henry Kissinger, people of that caliber. I had day-to-day contact with people of that caliber.
Wow. And what so now I'm interested because these are some big historical names, and we're going to touch on some history stuff too,
Sure.
because I know you have a love of history.
I do.
But what's a really cool story that you have from meeting one of those people? You know, because these are some of the biggest names in the 20th century that you're talking about.
Well, I have two stories that I can share. I think that might be of interest to the audience. Back then, in 1975, is when I first started at the UN. It was the International Year of Women, Women's International Year. And they had a conference down in Mexico City. And I went down to cover the conference, but also there was a delegation of Ukrainian women who were at the conference. And they wanted to raise the issue of women political prisoners in the Soviet Union. And Kurt Waldheim flew in to the conference, and at the Mexico City of Mexico airport, he held a spontaneous news conference. And I knew one of the Ukrainian journalists, a lady named Maria Zaretsky, who was there from the United States. I think she was from Detroit. And she wanted to pose this question to Kurt Waldheim. And I was at that thing because I was a journalist as well. But the meeting was packed with journalists, and it was impossible to get recognized. But Maria was sitting at a table where Kurt Waldheim was sitting. So there was kind of like a boardroom table, and around that boardroom table were all these journalists. And Kurt Waldheim comes in, and around those journalists, standing room only. And Kurt had a press assistant who was recognizing who could put questions to Kurt Waldheim. And I saw that Maria was sitting at the table trying to get his attention, but there was just no way. It was hopeless. So one of the things I did is I waltzed around to the behind all the journalists to the place where Maria was sitting. I got her business card, waltzed back up to where Kurt Waldheim's press secretary was, and I handed the press secretary her card and pointed out to the press secretary that Maria is there to ask a question. And sure enough, he asked, "Okay, who is this lady? What do you want?" And she raised the question of Ukrainian women prisoners in the Soviet Union, political prisoners in the Soviet Union. That's one little incident. Another one was I was lucky enough. One of my idols in life was a physicist, a Russian physicist named Sakharov, Andrei Sakharov. And he was married to a woman named Elena Bonner. And because he was a dissident in the Soviet Union, like he'd go and attend trials of people, of political prisoners that were going to be sentenced, to prison. And he would attend and bring press people with him so that the Soviet authorities would, be very anxious about why is this guy doing this? And they didn't like him. So he was a kind of in exile. But his wife was going blind. She had a eye issue, and she needed treatment, and she couldn't get it in the Soviet Union. And I knew about that, and particularly because I earlier had been in touch with Sakharov. The group I was working with had been in touch with Sakharov, and he would give us briefings on what was going on at these various trials and so on, and we'd pass on that information to the news media. But anyway, I'm in Mexico City. I know about this problem, and they have this tribunal effort of non-governmental people where they're talking about various issues. And I raised the issue of Elena Bonner. And I was pleased to see that question was raised the next day in their newsletter for the whole conference, that Elena Bonner needs to get out to the West to see an eye doctor because she's going blind, and she's not being allowed out. And shortly thereafter, she was released to go out to the West to get the operations for her eyes. So that
cool.
was a great moment.
That's cool. Now, how long were you at the UN?
3 years.
3 years.
Years, yeah.
That's impressive. I mean, and for the listeners that, are a little on the younger side, they don't realize, sometimes in that late 1970s, you're at the height of the Cold War. I mean, when you're talking East and West Germany, the Soviet Union, there was a lot of breakdowns in communications. So you were in probably probably next to World War II, probably one of the most pivotal times in American history in the 20th century at the United Nations.
Yeah, and I also belonged to a group of people around in New York that it was called the Committee for the Defense of Soviet Political Prisoners. And that committee greeted former Soviet political prisoners that had been released and organized meetings for people to learn about what was going on in the Gulag and the Soviet concentration camps and so on. And it was an honor for me back then, not only to work at the UN, but also to meet these dissidents. Now, many of them were Russian speakers, and that's how I kind of caught on a little bit to the Russian language, because they're talking to me thinking I can speak Russian. I can speak Ukrainian, but I can't speak Russian. But they think, well, these Ukrainians from the former Soviet Union, so he's talking to me in Russian. I'm sitting there. Yeah. But anyway, I met some, like Solzhenitsyn, the Litvinov's son, Chalidze, there were Plushch, Moroz. These were Soviet political prisoners that came through either there or later that I had a chance to meet in person. And I'd like to share one story in particular that's dear to my heart, if I may.
Yeah.
Roughly around 1975, just before I became a Soviet, not a Soviet, but a Freudian slip there, a UN correspondent. As I was a lawyer, I went to an international conference on human rights. And at that conference, there was a motion that we were trying to adopt for the lawyers to adopt International Lawyers Convention on human rights. And it wasn't going so well. And this guy Humphreys came. We were a bunch of young kids. I was then in my 20s. I'm like, straight out of law school kind of guy. And this Humphreys guy came to the back of the room and said, called us together. We're all young lawyers. We're all in our 20s. And we're frustrated as hell that all these seniors wouldn't pass on this human rights motion. I says, come here, you guys. You're saying it wrong. Say it like this, this, and this. Put this motion forward, see what happens. We put forward the motion. It was passed. I don't remember the details of the motion, but it was passed. But why I mentioned Humphreys is it was a great honor to meet one of the drafters of the International Declaration of Human Rights. He was a Canadian, and he was one of the guys that drafted the Declaration of Human Rights, International Declaration of Human Rights. And he encouraged us to continue on this road of human rights. And I was flying back from that conference. This is a long story. I'll try to keep it short.
No, yeah. You have me so interested because I've never met anybody that's been in this involved or in that close to something this touching history. You touched history.
Yeah. So on the way home, I'm flying to New York. It was from Washington to New York on a flight, and I pick up a Time magazine. And I read in the Time magazine about a Soviet political prisoner. His name was Danilo Semotiuk, strange name, Semotiuk. And he was imprisoned back then already for 25 years. He was a political prisoner, meaning he was imprisoned for his political views. His political views were he wanted to break up the Soviet Union. He didn't want the Soviet Union. He wanted freedom. And I'm thinking to myself, this is depressing. This guy's been in jail for 25 years. Like, my goodness. And that's the moment I thought, okay, I'm going to get onto this campaign and help this guy. Now, there are all kinds of people, Amnesty International, this is a big deal. I'm just a little guy in this campaign. But for the next 15 years, I was involved in the campaign to get this Danilo Semotiuk released. After 40 years in jail under Gorbachev, he finally served the 40-year sentence and was allowed to emigrate out of the Soviet Union. And he came to Canada. And I was one of the people who met him at the airport when he arrived in Canada at Calgary International Airport. Wow. And I got to meet him. And he said, why don't you accompany me to the American Bar Association convention where I'm going to talk about my experience? And I was honored. So we flew together to San Francisco to the American Bar Association meeting, where they had a separate panel on Soviet political prisoners. And we came a little late. And there were various Soviet political prisoners there talking about the Gulag and the concentration camps and so on. Wow. When we entered the room with Danilo Semotiuk, the meeting that was ongoing stopped. And all these Soviet dissidents got up on their feet to greet him. They knew who he was.
Wow.
Because he was the kingpin in the resistance, in the anti-Soviet resistance to the Gulag and human rights.
Wow.
And he spoke at the convention, and later I flew back home with him, and we kind of flubbed the presentation a bit because he didn't have enough time to really say what he wanted to say. So we wrote a letter to the ABA, and they finally endorsed a motion that a human rights motion, basically.
Wow.
But that was probably the biggest honor of my life, was to accompany Danilo Semotiuk.
40 years, yeah. 40 years in a gulag. And what people don't understand, and a lot of the younger generation don't understand, when we think about concentration camps, when we think about places for extermination, they think about Nazi Germany. They don't think about the Soviet Union. And a lot of times, from the accounts I've read, and I was a child when a lot of this was going on, the Cold War, that the atrocities and the concentration camps in a lot of ways were worse in the Soviet Union for a longer period of time than they were in Nazi Germany.
They were there before Nazi Germany, so it means the Nazis, probably picked up a lesson or two about how to run them. But as to the degree of, put it this way, Timothy Snyder in his book Bloodlands sort of gives us the main line on what was going on there. Both were terrible. There are many Jews who were in Soviet concentration camps. And I have some dear friends, Jewish friends, to this day, who, like even Semotiuk's, one of Semotiuk's closest friends was a Jewish guy who sat with them for many years and ultimately migrated to Israel.
You don't hear much about that. You don't hear much about the Jews in concentration camps in the Soviet Union, Russia. You heard about persecution. That is known there, but you don't really hear much about it. Again, you hear more about it in Germany than you do in Russia. And maybe that's because they were our ally in World War II and the propaganda wasn't there.
That's part of it.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing stuff. So you're a history lover, and you wrote a book. You wrote a book about the opera.
Yeah.
The opera. And that's a very interesting subject. Let's talk a little bit about your book and that.
Yeah. This is exotica, moving from one area to another, but I'm happy you're doing it. So I wrote this book. I've got it here. Now there is a connection in the theme here to what we've been talking about, so we're not lost. This is the book. It's called Solomia, And it's a book about my great aunt, who was a star of opera's golden age, Solomia. Her last name was Krushelnitska. Not many will know that name. But if you know who Maria Callas, this is now in the area of opera. Now, I have to confess, I'm not a expert on opera, but I came to learn about Solomia and her work, and as a result, I became knowledgeable about opera. For those who are interested in opera, before Maria Callas, which was a big name in opera, there was a Solomia Krushelnitska at the turn of the 20th century, who for the first decade of the 20th century was one of the big leaders in the opera world. She was a dramatic soprano. And if I may, in like two, 3 sentences, I might summarize what's in the book. Why was she a star? She knew 8 languages.
Wow.
8. She knew the lyrics and the music to over 60 operas by heart. And when she taught, she would be able to sing any aria from any opera just on the spot with her piano and teach students about opera in that way. She traveled around the world, throughout Europe, performing in opera, in former Tsarist Russia as it was then, in South America, Buenos Aires, Chile, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and throughout North America. She traveled in New York. She was in New York, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, and even in Canada, Montreal and Winnipeg in the 20s, in the roaring 20s.
Wow.
But I guess the key thing that she did was with respect to an opera called Madame Butterfly.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of the most popular operas, even to this day. It's one of the top operas of the day. And I'll just give you a brief story about Madame Butterfly. The composer, a guy named Puccini, staged this new opera, Madame Butterfly, about a geisha girl in Japan at the turn when Japan was opened up by the American Navy. I think it was back in I forget what century, but
1850s. I think we opened it up.
There you go.
Yeah.
And this naval officer named Pinkerton fell in love or had a romantic relationship with this geisha girl named Chiyo San. And the story goes that she had his son after they they went through a kind of a form of marriage, and shortly after that he announced he has to go back to the U.S., but he promises to come back, and the story is about how she waits for him to come back. She has this kid, and when he comes back, the two meet and they realize they got to decide what's going to be the future of the kid. That's the opera. Puccini staged this opera at La Scala, which was the world's leading opera house in Milan. And it was a disaster. It got whistled down, shouted down, and they shut down the opera. And the whole run was shut. And so the guy was crestfallen. And said, here's an opera. He loved the opera, but he fell apart. So he went to his friend, this guy named Toscanini, Arturo Toscanini, who was a conductor, and who ultimately, by the way, became the conductor of the NBC Symphony in New York. But back in Italy, in Milan, he goes to Toscanini and says, listen, my opera collapsed. What do I do? And Toscanini says, okay, go see Solomia. And they were friends. All 3 of them were friends. He said, go see Solomia. She's the only one that's going to rescue this opera for you. So he goes to her and he says, would you please help me? She figures, now she's at the top of her fame back then. It was a big ask. But she said, okay, I'll do it. And so they worked together and they staged the opera in a place called Brescia, not far from Milan in Italy, in 1904 to great success. And one of the final scenes of that opera, she's now playing Chiyo San, the lead, and that's a teenager, but she's playing a teenager and she's in her 30s, but she did it. and the crowd loved it. Like they had 7 standing ovations at the end of the opera.
Wow.
But the final scene of the opera is the mother brings the little boy over to the side, and she says to the little boy, in her goodbye to the little boy, she says, "Take a look at this face. It's the face of your mother. Remember it. You will never see it again." And the boy's taken by Pinkerton off to America, and the mother commits Harry dies, kills her, suicide. So that's a very powerful opera. They made it together. They worked together to resurrect the opera and save it. And to this day, it's an opera. So that story and many others are in the book.
Wow, that's and what people don't realize is when she's traveling around in the 19-teens and the 1920s, it's not like today where you jump on a 747 and you can be in Los Angeles in 6 hours. You're talking about somebody that literally had to take a steamship someplace. Maybe if they were lucky, they might have had an automobile, maybe, but definitely train travel, horse-drawn wagons, unpaved roads. And you're not talking about places, even today, a lot of them are not as developed. So, 100 years ago, they definitely weren't that developed. So her travel was, is there any interesting stories about some of her travel from one place to another?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you this. She arrived in, they loved her overseas, and the Americans figured out, hey, this she's a star. We need her to come to Canada, to the United States, to perform in New York, and so she was scheduled to perform at Carnegie Hall, but there was some disruption in terms of her being able to arrive at that time. So she arrived. This is in 1928. She arrived in New York. Now, 1928 New York, consider that. That's when the Chrysler Building was built. It just finished. And they had a competition, Chrysler Building versus the Empire State Building. Who would build the building first? Chrysler came in first. So she arrived when the Chrysler Building was just up. In Harlem, Duke Ellington is going crazy with jazz, a new form of music. It's the Roaring 20s. Talk about gaiety and life, open life, celebration. And that was perfect environment for Salomia. She loved music of all kinds. She sang in English and in other languages, of course. And so she had a direct firsthand exposure to this new form of music and the Roaring 20s. Just before 1929 and the stock market collapse. And as part of her visit into the United States, as I mentioned, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, the whole works, and then up to Canada, she traveled by train, and I've traveled by train in this route. It's like, 2 days travel from, Toronto to Winnipeg. Like that's over 1,000 miles. Maybe it's not 2 days, but it's a long ride on the train. And back in those days, a thing just in passing as part of the research for the book, I learned that most of the conductors and the people running the train were Black Americans, Black Canadians. Yeah. And they're doing the porters. They had the porters. They did the beds and so on. And there's a unique history about those guys. Then that was one area where they were able to make a go. And if running the trains going back and forth. So she went through that. I think it would be very interesting. What kind of experience that must have been. Yeah. And there was for the Winnipeg presentation, some guy came from Yorkton, Saskatchewan, by horse and buggy, to attend this performance of Salomia in Winnipeg. Like it's wild, So she got through that those presentations. got on a steamship over to Europe, and lo and behold, shortly after that, the basement falls out of the market. And, 1929, catastrophe. And that goes into the 30s. Now, in the 30s, 33 is a huge year shortly after. 33, three things happen. Great Depression, like full steam Great Depression all over the world. Hitler rises to power in Germany as the chancellor. And in the Soviet Union is the Great Famine, Holodomor, they call it, where they say the statistics now are about at least 4 million people starved to death in Ukraine, and another million outside of Ukraine due to an artificial famine imposed by Stalin on Ukraine. So big events, and that's a prelude to World War II, of course.
Wow. How long did it take you to write this book? I mean, it's so detailed from what you're telling me.
Yeah, it took, I think it took about, I don't remember, I think it's probably about 7 years, maybe even longer. It could have been a little longer. Wow. At least 7 years.
Wow. And you did all the research yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, this isn't Google and ChatGPT. This research was in person, traveling all over the world. My daughter traveled with me, and she filmed what we were, researching. And her film is about to come out. I just saw it the other day. She, she got it's a 1 hour biographical documentary film.
And what's the name of her film called?
It's Solomia, A Family Story, I think. She's gonna be entering it into festivals, hoping to attract interest through the film festivals, and ultimately out into the marketplace.
That's cool. Now, is there a particular film festival or anything that you're aware of? So maybe some of our listeners can go out and look it up, or get in touch with her, or find out where to see it or anything if they're interested.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So my daughter's name is Natalie Semotiuk. Copenhagen is where she's aiming. That's one of the big international film festivals, documentary film festivals. So Copenhagen will be one. I think she's looking at, there's a film festival in Toronto next year. It's the Ukrainian Film Festival. So that'll be sometime in the fall of next year. And she's looking at Italy, potentially. There's a Puccini festival that happens every year in July in Torre del Lago, which is on the coast, on the western coast of Italy, near Viareggio and Milan. She's looking at staging something there as well, and in Ukraine as well.
That's really cool. Now your daughter is in the film industry. Now you also have a background as a producer. Am I not?
A bit of I was a producer for a year of it was called Contact. It was a film, a sort of a interview style contact program. This was in Edmonton, Alberta, and it was a community-based television program. So I interviewed celebrities local celebrities in the Edmonton market.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Did you meet anybody really cool when you did that?
I can't say anybody that would inspire immediate sort of applause, but I tried to have meetings where I would get two sides to a story and have two speakers on various themes. And political themes were often, or historical or political themes were a part of the menu once a week. So we'd get someone who, a liberal and a conservative, and we'd talk about what's going on. Local politics was one of the areas. I wish I could have. I don't know if I've even got a copy of one of the films from back then. But sure, anyway.
So if somebody's interested in getting your book, where is a good place that they can pick up a copy?
There's a website. It's buysolomiabook.com.
Okay.
Solomia, spelled SOLOMEA, book.com. And you don't have this. I'm not. I don't think you have that site. I'm not sure that I gave it to you. But buysolomiabook.com is probably the best place. There's an audio version that I believe is the best of the bunch. I've got it in English. I've got it on. You can get it on Kindle, digital, or hard copy. But there's the audio version that I recorded, and I think that's probably the one that I think is the best of the bunch.
So now moving forward a little bit here, and I know we're a little all over the place, but you've got so many great stories to tell and so many cool things. I mean, I could sit and talk to you for 4 hours, but you're now an attorney that helps with immigration and helping people become citizens or residents or visa holders, stuff like that. And you're based out of Canada doing this, but
I see you might have frozen there for a little bit. See if you come back on.
Yep. Sorry, we lost you for a second.
Yeah.
Go back.
Yeah.
So, Justin, we're just going to pick up on the last question. I was asking about your law firm and what you guys do.
Thanks for asking that question. And Sean, you're a spectacular interviewer to be able to hop around like this, hopscotch like this with me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, in my work in immigration, I am a U.S. and Canadian immigration attorney, so I can help people with immigration issues going southbound to the United States from Canada, for example, or anywhere in the world to the United States, or anywhere in the world to Canada, including U.S. people coming up to Canada. And our law firm does work for people who want to get citizenship or permanent residence in other countries as well. An area of interest for me has been the political developments in the United States related to immigration, and especially the concern over the supposed 11 million or so undocumented immigrants in the United States and how they're being treated. So a comment I can make about that is, according to Pew Research, there's about 11 million, and there may be more, there may be 13, I don't know, there could be as many as perhaps 20 million such undocumented immigrants. And they recently passed that budget through Congress, giving Trump more ICE officials to chase after these undocumented immigrants. And a key element to this is who are these people and are they criminals? Because they are all labeled as criminals by the administration. And of course, the answer is no, they're not all criminals. There are some criminals, definitely. And according to the Pew Research, there might be, 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million of these people who are people who have committed criminal offenses of some kind. And I don't think anybody would argue about, well, should we deport such people who are not legally here and who have a criminal record? I think we're all on board with that. Yeah. But that's not what's going on. What's going on is the definition of criminal has been expanded to, from the administration point of view, to anybody who's among these 11 million undocumented immigrants, many of whom are, well, some of whom are kids who came with their parents to the United States. They had no personal involvement. They just came along with the United States. These are called so-called DACA dreamers who are in limbo because they can't lead a normal life because they're considered unlawful. And then there are millions of these people who have lived here. Like the vast majority of them, I think 2/3 of them have been living in the United States for over 10 years. So imagine that you've been in the US for 10 years, you pay taxes, you're in you're working, you're in your community, in the churches or in the community centers, contributing to the life of the country, and you're being swept away. You're being they're trying to collect you and ship you out to places like El Salvador or whatever. There's the degree of lawlessness when it comes to deporting these people is astounding. I get it. If you're going to try and do something, do it lawfully. But there's a lot. For example, just one example is over the Labor Day weekend, the administration collected several airplanes worth of undocumented children from South America. And in the middle of the night was trying to deport them to South America. And lawyers got wind of it, and they had to wake up a federal judge in the middle, I think it was on Sunday night at 2:00 in the morning, to get an order stopping this illegal deportation. And it was only because the judge, a federal judge, ordered that it be stopped and that these people be given due process, including blocking one airplane that had already taken off with a whole airplane load of children, to bring it back. And it did come back because of the judge's order. Now that's going through the courts now.
Wow, it turned around in midair and it came back?
Came back.
I never even heard anything about that.
See? Yeah, but that's true. That's what happened over the Labor Day weekend. Why over Labor Day? Why in the middle of the night? What are these children dangerous to the public? You have to hide?
Wow.
Now I'm relying on a report that was published and by a reliable source on these details. So that's one example. Now there are all kinds of others, Alligator Alley and what's going on over there. And then there's this guy, Garcia, that was shipped out from the United States to that unholy prison in El Salvador, and then got brought back, and now he's still in proceedings and so on. Wow. Like, what a way to run a department, in my opinion.
Wow.
Like, now there are ways, in my view, that you could deal with these people in a more humane manner and achieve what you're trying to achieve. And I would say, now, in terms of what they're trying to achieve, they want to make sure the border is sealed so that people aren't just flooding in, it just willy-nilly. Yes, I understand that. And if you're not legally present in the United States, most of these people are holdovers. They come in as a visitor and then they don't go back at the end of their period of authorized stay. That's what's happening. But you got to ask, at what point does someone like that reach a point in life where the equities are evened out? And can you not give this person some way of paying society for the transgression, but not like terrorizing them by sending them back to countries where, they escape because of, I don't know what, gangs or poverty or, whatever it is, climate change or whatever. And there is a way, you can pass a law, and among others, Kamala Harris had put forward a proposal to pass a law in Congress that would deal with this issue, involving such things as community service, fines, and stuff like that, in exchange for a path to permanent residence, qualifying for permanent residence.
I remember I was in the Army. There was a guy, he was from somewhere in Africa. I honestly don't remember what country he was. And he had joined the Army because I guess serving in the Army got him a pathway to citizenship somehow. There was a program. I'm not really, are you familiar with that? I'm
Yeah,
not really
yes,
familiar.
yeah. You can get permanent residence by serving in the Army.
Okay. Yeah, I know he wanted to be a U.S. citizen in the worst way, and he had a green card. I think that's how he joined the Army.
Yeah.
He was about 18, 19 years old. I think his parents were immigrants. He was born wherever he was in Africa, and he said he had to do, I think, 6 years or something like that, or
Yeah,
maybe it was 4 years or something at that point. I'm not very familiar with, because, obviously that
Yeah.
didn't affect me, but
yeah.
I do
There's a
remember that.
program like that where you get permanent residence, and then after that, you can apply for citizenship.
So, for any of our listeners that are in the military or a veteran or thinking about going in the military, can you kind of like touch on that a little bit?
I'm not that you're stretching me beyond what I know just offhand. I do know that there is, if you join, if you're not a citizen and you're not a permanent resident of the United States, but you want to get permanent residence, let's say you're from, I don't know where, Australia or Africa somewhere, or Far East Asia, but you want to come and live in the United States. If you sign up with the Army or Navy or whatever, the military, by serving in the military, there's an opportunity for you to file an application for permanent residence, meaning to get a green card. And you have to go through the process. What opens the door for you is the service that you have provided to the United States and putting your life in harm's way. That opens the door for you to apply for such a benefit. And you can get green card status, and thereafter, after 5 years, you can become a citizen of the United States. Those are the contours of it. But I would have to look into my books to give you more detail on exactly what the process is.
I mean, that sounds like a good program. If somebody's willing to put their name on a dotted line for the defense of the United States, I mean, the least we could do is say, hey, look, you earned your pathway to citizenship. And that's not new. I mean, the United States did that with African Americans after the American Civil War. They said, look, you guys, served the Union Army, you fought in the Civil War. We passed an amendment to make you U.S. citizens. So if you're listening out there to this show and you're interested in taking that route, it probably wouldn't hurt for you to investigate it and talk to a recruiter or talk to Andy's firm or whoever, and maybe they can help you out. Or if you're in the military right now and you're somebody that says, hey, my time is up, I'm getting ready to get out, and I did my 4, 5, 6 years, maybe reach out to Andy or his firm and see if they can help you out. Definitely.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, we can help.
So where are you seeing, you said you do a lot of stuff with the United States and Canada, but you also do stuff all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm seeing a lot of stuff on the internet about people trying to get second citizenship in other countries outside of the United States, or even to some extent, I'm seeing it from Canadians too. Not as much as the United States, but where are you seeing the most people going or trying to apply for residency visas or citizenship?
Good question. A popular area is the Caribbean countries like St. Kitts, Antigua, and so on, where if you invest a certain amount of money, starting at as low as, let's say, $100,000, you can get the doors open for gaining citizenship in those countries with your whole family, and also your the rules are pretty flexible, even with respect to older children beyond 21 up to 25, I believe, and even parents, for example, in some instances where you can all essentially immigrate to one of the Caribbean islands. And there's a whole, flock of them, Antigua, St. Kitts. I can't just list off all of them, but there's about 4 or 5 of them that offer the benefits of travel worldwide, perhaps not to America and Canada, but to, for example, the Schengen countries, the European countries. With your passport, you can travel there, and even into the Middle East or Far East, including China in some instances. So it's a matter of, usually it's either a flat investment in a fund that the government has set up, which authorizes you to get the citizenship, or it might involve a real estate investment as a way to get the citizenship. And it's quick. It's a matter of maybe 4 or 5 months, 6 months, and you get the citizenship. And so what you're really getting, apart from what you're getting, is the passport, which you can, if you're now, for an American or Canadian, that may not be the number one thing. For them, it might be preferable to perhaps move into Europe, Portugal, Malta. There are a number of countries. I gather Hungary was trying to start something up over there that might be useful for people who want to immigrate somewhere elsewhere. New Zealand and Australia also have very good programs for investors who want to go down there to live and get citizenship. So, for example, if you're concerned about a possible nuclear war worldwide, and you want to escape the damage from nuclear war, which is, not a pleasant thought, but maybe you want to go to Australia or New Zealand and get citizenship down there, and maybe you're willing to pay. I think one requires about $5 million, if I'm not mistaken. Australia's citizenship program, I think it's permanent resident program, is $5 million. In New Zealand, they're tough programs, not easy to qualify for financially. But the theory goes that they're so far out of harm's way in terms of a nuclear war that you might be able to survive it.
They're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Or perhaps, for example, Argentina is on the cusp of coming up with a new program that might be interesting for investors to come down and go there. Uruguay is an interesting program for investment as well. Now, maybe those, I'm not an expert on nuclear war or anything like that, but I'm told that nuclear war, the only ones are Australia and New Zealand. This is hearsay, don't rely on my words. Check it out for yourself. But otherwise, if things get choppy and you're unhappy and you're looking for a place to escape to, perhaps South America, like Uruguay, for example. Uruguay is considered the kind of Switzerland of South America. And as I mentioned, Argentina appears to be cooking up some program that may be of interest. We're looking at it as a possibility.
I've seen a lot of people in the United States are starting to look at Portugal and Spain, Italy and Ireland.
Yes, and Greece also.
Oh, Greece. I didn't know about Greece.
Yeah, there's another one there.
Oh, wow. And what's the draw for that? Is it cost of living, do you think? Or is it just the different services, or just to get out of the United States?
Well, climate is one question. Climate. Culture is another. And then it's a financial issue, like how much does it cost? And these are all democracies, so there's a political element to it as well. Those are I would say, the main factors. Portugal has been very desirable. As it's beautiful if you ever go to Portugal. There's some really beautiful communities there where people can invest in. From what I'm aware of, it's a reasonable program. Almost always these programs are permanent resident programs, not citizenship programs. You don't buy citizenship, you buy permanent residence, and you can qualify eventually to become a citizen.
Yeah, I know that like a lot of countries too have like a retirement plan. So like somebody like me, I have a pension from the military.
Yeah.
And I've looked into investing into, not sorry, I've investigated, I don't say investing, investigated into going to countries that say you have to have, I don't know, 2,000 American dollars a month. I'll make something up off the top of my head. And that seems to be very popular too with people with Social Security or with a military pension or some sort of a government retirement pension or maybe a union pension. Are you seeing that as well?
Yes. Uruguay has exactly that. That's the interest I have in Uruguay. It's a fairly stable country. It's, beautiful. I mean, it's got coast and everything you want. And it has this low threshold for people. You don't have to put up $100,000 or $1 million or whatever. Your income can be the factor that qualifies you for coming to reside in Uruguay.
Wow.
So check it out if you're interested in that.
We were interested. Shane and I were looking at Costa Rica and Panama because they had a retirement visa there. But I've gotten some mixed feedback about some of those countries that they might not be the best places to go right now, and that there might be other places that might be a little bit better.
I have a friend who immigrated to Panama from Edmonton. And I was in Colombia one day and out on the street somewhere I forget the name of the city, but anyway, I'm walking down the street and this guy comes running. Andy, how are you? And I look, and this guy's from Edmonton, my friend from Edmonton. What are you doing here? Well, I live in Panama, but I came up to Colombia for a vacation. How's Panama? Fantastic. Good medical treatment, costs nothing, comparatively speaking. Beautiful climate, et cetera, et cetera. That's the report I got from him. But there was some discussion about Trump being not very happy about Panama and possibly poking around in there because the passageway was causing some trouble for ships. So that's the latest I know about Panama. Costa Rica seems to be a place where there's a great deal of interest in tourism. And I'm told from those who have been there that it's a beautiful place to be. I don't know much about their immigration program, though.
So, Andy, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or your firm and say, hey, Andy, I want to explore some options on moving abroad, what's a good way that they can get a hold of you or an associate at your firm or your company in general?
Okay. So I'm at Pace Law Firm, PACE, so pacelawfirm.com is the easiest way to remember. Now I'm on all social media outlets. An email that I have is Andy, ANDY, at myworkvisa.com. Okay. And I have a website, myworkvisa.com as well. So any one of those. But I think the easiest way to remember would be pacelawfirm.com.
Now, Andy, as we wrap up the show here, I have one question, and I ask everybody at this, at the end of the show. Sure. You have been a phenomenal guest. You have lived a life of history, education. You've written books. You've helped people move around the world. And it's going to be really hard to ask this question to you because you just have been a man, have done so much. But if you could look back at a young Andy just starting his career, what's the one message that you would give yourself?
Well, I'll give you this 7 rules for a successful life, which I try to follow. So here are the rules. Number 1, come on time. Number 2, do what you promise. Number 3, finish what you start. Number 4, mean what you say. Don't be cynical. Number 5, actions speak louder than words. Number 6, be kind. And number 7, be grateful for what you have.
That's some great stuff. And for everybody listening out there, Andy, you've been a great guest. Make sure to go to his website, check out his book. If you're interested in immigration or you're interested in getting residency visas or something, reach out to Andy. I mean, him and I were talking a little bit before the show. I know I'm going to stay in touch with him because I may have some business I might be doing with him in the future episodes of the Kling Connection. But Andy, thank you so much for being a guest today on the show.
Sean, you've been marvelous. A really fine host. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. And if you like what you saw, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and click that notification bell below. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple iTunes, also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and TikTok, and pretty much any other social media platform you can think of. Make sure to follow along our adventures and stay tuned to next week for our next show. And until next time, have fun storming the castle.
Yo.